All right. So I'm here with Liz Cook. And Liz, I'm so excited to talk to you. And
Mhm.
I'm a bit nervous as well. I've been following you on YouTube and just, your work for for a while, and I've just been so gravitated towards your work. I think when I first learned about the psoas, when I was in a yoga class, it sort of clicked something to me, and I started to research on what the psoas is. And you're probably the first person that comes up on the Google list. It's yeah, it's Liz Cook everywhere when it comes to the psoas. Even if I've been to other articles where they talk about the psoas, they reference you in their articles. So you know, it's quite a big thing when it comes to what the psoas is. And you've been educating people on the psoas for at least about over 40 years. Um, and just, from what I understand is it's this reframing the language on
Mhm.
how we talk about the psoas and how we, you know, see what the psoas is. And um, so let's just begin with that. So you say that the psoas is not a muscle,
Right.
right? And it's the muscle of the soul.
I don't say it's a muscle of the soul. People have quoted me that way, but that actually comes from the Taoist traditions, probably the more modern Taoist traditions.
Mhm.
They call it the muscle of the soul. I don't call it a muscle at all. So I do think it's soulful and that the core of our being is soulful. But I don't, but that's where that statement came from.
Mhm.
It's a Taoist tradition. And it was in a Taoist healing book that somebody showed me where a Taoist healer or teacher spoke to it in that way.
Mhm.
So, yes, it's been called that. I call it the messenger of your midline. I use an embryological model, not a mechanical biomechanical model.
Yeah.
So I use a living model. And in a living model, the psoas is the deepest core tissue in the literal core of your body. So you're looking at an organism that's unfolding,
Mm.
emerging always. You never lose your embryo. Your embryo is within you. And so you're basically a flower blossoming, you could say. And in that is the deepest core from the fascial connective tissue point of view is enwrapped in a kind of fluid bag of your central nervous system, your kidneys, adrenals, which are on top of your kidneys, and your psoas. So you're really literally in the center axis, what is called the conception vessel and governing vessel in Chinese medicine. I'm going to cough for a minute. I've been talking, I taught all morning, so
Ah,
okay. My apologies. So that's the way I look at it.
wow. Um, when we talk about unfurling and blossoming, why why is the psoas so linked to that? Like, I think I'm trying to understand it on a very intellectual level. Why?
Well, when you change the paradigm, so this is where you change the paradigm. Most people think if you want to know body, you study anatomy.
Yeah.
But anatomy is, as Jaap van der Volle, embryologist, Dutch embryologist and wise man, and a medical doctor and a scientist and a professor and taught anatomy to Olympic athletes. He is an anatomist. He said it's a false dogma. It's you're looking at a cadaver and you're parsing it out in pieces and you're naming those pieces. And you think that teaches you about movement, but that's not what a cadaver does. Cadavers aren't moving. So embryology offers a paradigm, a scientific paradigm to study the human organism. And when you move into that, you're looking at the zygote, which is the kind of who you are before even your cells begin to divide. So you come into being, and he would say, you don't use cells. You're not made of cells. Okay.
Yeah.
You utilize cells to become. So it's a moving, living, literal how we come into being. And that means when the cells do start to divide and multiply and start the organism growing in your mother's womb, you're looking at an organism that is literally unfolding and infolding, meaning there's a wave moving always like the sea back to its source and coming back out. So the center of our organism, from a scientific point of view, is called a torus. It's a physics idea that energy is always flowing around and through our organism, which is what Chinese medicine also validates with its idea of a conception vessel and governing vessel, meaning the center of your being, you could say, is the universe. And you are circling around that universe, and you are showing up in that universe, and specifically the earth. And so the unfolding is literally like cells divide and multiply around this axis. We're organizing around an axis. And out of that buds all the organs and viscera and bones and our budding of our arms and legs. So all movement, we're what's called a spine-based organism. We are literally a central channel that is organizing and showing up here. And you see that in the fetus when you see the little round C-shaped fetus curled and how it's starting to then unfold when it actually, after birth, spirals through the portal of their mother onto the earth. They do unfold. Their little hands are closed and they start to open up, and the feet, everything starts to open up. While we're in the womb, though, there's an interesting thing. There's parts of the organism that show up, like your primal tube, your mouth to your sphincter, and then it's enfolded into the body.
Mm.
So it's very interesting. There's this core, they call it the midline, but it's not a line, it's a field of energy.
Wow.
It's called the primitive streak, even before it's the middle line. It becomes the notochord, which is your primal brain, your back brain, your spinal cord. And then it becomes what we think of as our spine. So that's the very center. And it's not in the back of our body, it's literally centered. And so, as a yogi, you're looking at the chakras, those are part of that center of being.
Yeah. Wow, that's really fascinating. Obviously, like if I'm still connected, like it's an unfurling, so I'm not separate from
No,
that.
you can never be separate from that. You are that.
I am that. So, so I'm still carrying that with me till now.
Still unfolding. What is separated is the cortex,
Uh-huh.
because the Western culture, even if you're from a Southern hemisphere,
Mm.
is dominant. And the domination is to control over the living matter. So we have focused on developing the frontal lobes to and the eyes and the coordination of how we put our attention on something. And so we used to be the world, what, 4,000 years ago or 8,000 years ago, I don't know the exact historical time, was a goddess
Yeah.
orientation, which was whole body experience.
Yeah.
And then as we moved to this ABCs, learning alphabets, reading, is when scribing came in,
Mm.
not as symbols, but as language, our brains started to develop different. And that's where we're going. That's the mechanistic model of where the organism is going. It's becoming a machine because we fell in love with them. Um, it's not part of the earth, but we are part of the earth, and our bones resonate that frequency of the earth. So we're not part of that. We are, but where we've separated is in teaching children to, we think the sooner you read, the better.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
sooner you separate from the earth, the better. The sooner you stop acting like an animal, the better.
Yeah, that is so true. As soon as you learn your timetables, the better.
I, I don't know what for better, what, for better what, but for better.
Hmm.
Mm.
That's really fascinating. Um, because I remember when, in my younger years, when I was back in India, I came here when I was 9 years old. I came to Australia when I was nine. I just remember playing a lot, playing in the rain, just always running, doing something, just playing, like being outside.
Mhm.
And luckily, no one stopped me. My parents didn't stop me. I think I was really lucky when
Mhm.
it came to that. So I was really close to the earth.
Mhm.
Um, so I think when I came to Australia and I was still really close to the earth, I think, my friends or just, people at that time, they were still going out to play after coming back from school. And but in the recent years, I've really seen that shift where, when the phones came in, when the laptops came in, and people, kids don't go out to play, or even adults don't go out and stay out in nature as much as they used to, because we're just so bounded by our laptops and Netflix and all of that. So I I do feel that disconnect. I do
Mhm.
feel that longing that, wow, there was a time when I felt so free. Not that I'm unable to feel free now, but it's not the same.
No, it's not. Mhm.
And yes, yoga is great. I love doing yoga, but it doesn't tap into that wildness
No, it doesn't.
that's in me that, I feel like I sometimes consciously or unconsciously have to suppress or end up suppressing. And then I go,
Mhm.
okay, why do I feel so down? Why do I feel so sad? Or why do I feel so irritated?
Yeah.
You know? So I find that really fascinating because, when I was reading a book called Stalking Wild psoas,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about that? Why is that? Why did you choose that adjective for psoas?
I don't know. I can't remember why I chose to. I really can't. I can't remember the moment where that was like, I mean, in a way, I could have said tracking. I could have like used a different, I don't know why I used that word. I really actually don't. Um, but it did resonate, and I do trust my wild animal being that I am. So, and I like stalking because we are terrified of stalking. But animals, when they're stalking, are not like humans who are stalking. They're not, they don't have evil intentions. They aren't manipulative. They're
Mm,
very direct. If they're hungry, they're hungry, right? And there is a kind of dance that happens. But in the indigenous cultures, well, compared to the colonization thinking, the colonization is that we stalk and we aim and we capture and we kill.
yeah,
But animals in when indigenous cultures speak to their relationship with other species, other more than human beings, um, there is a dance there. There is a dynamic energetically. There's often an offering. There is often a way that nature takes that. We've interpreted that as violence, but if understood from this um, a different kind of reciprocal participation. Everything eats.
mm,
All of a sudden, the relationship is very different. And so, stalking to me was curiosity. Um, it was accessing animal body.
yeah,
It has that feeling. and it's in within me that I'm exploring, that
Yeah.
I'm, yeah. So,
How do you explore that within you?
well, at this point in my life, I'm I'm more simply receptive. I stop thinking. I don't think. It's not that I don't have thoughts. It's just that I don't value those in the openness of perception. So I'm really interested in perception. So the ability to open all the sensory systems, to be in my bones. Bones to me are the most bone knowing is if I'm stalking anything these days, it's bone knowing. It's the ability to hear the vibrational field of my own bones in relationship to the earth and the what we might call intuition,
Mm.
the knowledge that comes from non-thinking creatures. And bone is the closest vibrational tissue we have. It's the densest in the sense of what we think of bone as being dense, but it's not rigid. It floats, it breathes, it's fluid. It comes from the ocean. That's where bone comes from. You're entering a different field of consciousness, is what I would say, when we allow that to actually to move us, to be moved. So I'm very I'm in love with being moved by life itself, like how it moves me, rather than me top-down control over behavior.
Which is the majority of us.
Yeah, so that's probably why I'm up on a mountain, over the Pacific Ocean, and I know that's why it is. It's why I don't live in town, It's I want to be on the earth. I want to be in that field of deep resonance with and reciprocation with life,
Yeah,
which I understand is a privilege, a huge privilege.
yeah, yeah. I got really fascinated by the bones when I saw your interview with the bone shaman.
Oh yeah.
I've
Oh,
listened to that a few times or watched that a few times. And I just couldn't believe that she's, at that time she was 86 or
yeah, she's in her 90s now. She's still
yeah,
alive.
amazing. And, what she talked about the heart and, being in the hara, which is that one point, it's also where the psoas is as well. And, to land in the bones, to relax and to, come into your bones. And I was so fascinated by it. And I know I think I am quite aware of when I'm not in my bones, when I have not landed and how much I resist.
Mm.
So I'm quite aware so that it is a choice and
Choice. Mm-hmm.
that it's definitely a choice. And there are times when I'm really resistant to landing.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm. But
I
when
mean,
I, yeah,
what it's like to be in your bones. How interesting, It like, and yet sometimes you don't want to pay attention to that.
yeah,
No, is that what you're saying?
yeah,
That's
you don't want to pay attention to that. But when I do, go through it, when I do get through that resistance and I choose to land, there is this opening, there is this gentleness, there is this softness,
mm,
there is more freedom, and I can feel this, movement around me and the energy shifts as well around me and how I interact with other people,
mhm,
how I interact with nature, how I end up perceiving myself.
mhm.
So that definitely changes. But the interesting thing is, why don't I want that to be my
That would be a question I would play with is what is the resistance? I mean, some of it is there's a lot of stimuli, right? And as you said, with computers, that really shifted. And really what we're doing in that state is we're becoming uh, um, hypnotized in a certain way,
Yeah.
right? We're being taken. You know, I want to be moved, but that's being taken. There's a difference between the two. And so when I'm taken, you know, if I want to waste time because I am anxious to do something and I don't want to sit around, all I have to do is scroll a few minutes and, you know, the time has gone by, right? There's no perception of time. There's no perception of location. There's no perception of ground. There's no perception. You're not landed and located.
Yeah.
So if you're not landed and located, then there's a disassociation. And I would say that some people, disassociation started at the beginning of their experience of birth. Drugs, um, the birth experience itself is often where what people define as feeling unembodied or disembodied is literally the industrial birth complex
Mm.
because it's a mechanical process in which the mother is sedated often. And so one of the things that happen in the birth experience is that the the, the baby is following its mother's psoas down through the birth canal.
Yeah.
It's literally staying in tune with mother the whole way. And then all of a sudden, I often hear the story of I don't know, the whole thing disappeared. I was just floating in air. I was like, there's no connection. Like, where'd she go? What happened? And that's the sedation, which makes the psoas go flaccid in the mother, and the mother disappears. Boy,
Wow.
that says a lot, doesn't it? In terms of
Yeah.
so many levels of where we are as the human species. The great mother disappears.
And then it's just all of a sudden there is this separation.
Yes, and then the separation is very violent well, the whole idea that you have to be delivered is a very patriarchal and control over dominance, the dominance of birth, because a mother doesn't need to be delivered. Um, it's also a very Christian perspective. It doesn't need, she doesn't need to be delivered. The baby needs to be caught, and she can catch her own baby but also someone else. So think of the first moment you arrive here, if you do even get to go down through the birth canal, and every woman is a vessel for life. That's how we show up here on the earth. She should be sacred, but that's not how she's treated. And the first thing that this little creature is touched by is plastic, and then we wonder why we're so in love with plastic. That's the first thing we interact. We interact with mechanical sounds. We're not hearing birds or water running or smell of the earth. We're hearing mechanical things. We are literally being brought through a process of associating with mechanistic things as our first. So there's a kind of love affair with all of that because there is no relationship to earth. We are isolated and then we often are separated as well. You know, traditionally the baby landed on the mother's body, the naked body being the first earth. And they do a crawl. An infant who's lifted up and put on her mother's belly does a crawl, which is interesting. It's just like the army crawl up along the terrain of a mother's body you know and what are they doing their their smell and their whole sense is longing for something they have never experienced, so longing is associated with this whole showing up. But when you're traumatized through that whole experience, there's and drugged, there's a disassociation, so there's a familiarity in disassociating.
I see. I see. So there is that the relationship was already there to begin with, and you unconsciously reach out for that again and again and again. Do you think that's the right way, or maybe, you know,
What are you referring to as the relationship?
to when you say that there is that familiarity to that dissociation.
Oh, of disassociating. Well, disassociating, as one woman said who has worked, studied with me, who was premature.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So she never reached the level of really getting the impulses of the spiral, which is it's a fire in the belly. It's a literal proprioceptive experience in the gut, in the hara of of movement. And that starts the spiral down through the birth canal. So she didn't experience that. She arrived before she was fully formed. And she she'll say, I can float in water and so I can be in bliss forever. Like what I want is to show up here.
Yeah.
See, she's not worried about getting to bliss. She's blissful. And then all of a sudden, here she is. She doesn't know where boundaries are. She doesn't know where her body, she doesn't have a sense of coming up against something and feeling it come back into you, which is relationship.
Mm.
Right? So for the dispersal of energy, which a lot of people are looking for in enlightenment, or that's a kind of like that's why they call it a bypass, because really you're not showing up here and being human or being an animal or being part of nature or whatever this whole experience is. Um, and so there's a lack of tethering. There's a lack of grounding. And the place I find grounding over and over again is in the bones.
Wow.
And that's the bone shaman. She was a physical therapist for a long time, in the hospital. And then she became a Taoist healer, and because she healed herself of a bone disease.
Yeah.
And that's where she started to realize that bone breathes. And I love that term because we don't think of bone as this living matrix of information, of intelligence. But our organism is biointelligent. We are intelligent. We are reading signals that are not just in our eyes and ears and nose, and like there's a whole organism that's responding to life itself. And when we land and locate, that's when we really get to show up here, not just survive, but thrive, to flourish, to do whatever it is we came here to do, or bring whatever gifts we have to offer the world into existence, into actually showing up here. And I think there's something so incredibly delicious about showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm so drawn to your work because
Mhm.
it's, I started, I guess, you could say this spiritual journey, however you want to put it, with meditation. And I really felt something was missing, something deep, deep was missing. Not that the meditation doesn't work and it's not good. And, I'm not saying people shouldn't do it, but something was missing. And I think the big part of it for me was the grounding. I felt like I was not grounded. And I really, truly, my soul needed that grounding because I can't be tamed, and it's not like going out and, being reckless, but I don't thrive when I'm feeling like I'm being tamed.
Yes. Good way of putting it. It is. That's exactly. And that little girl was thriving under those conditions of running around on the ground in the rain and the mud and that is who we are.
Yeah.
And that may not be what's expected of us, but that's a level of deep. I mean, I tell people to, go back to like finding a grassy knoll and rolling down a hill, or, literally getting in the earth, literally wrapping your arms around a tree. Because I'll tell you why it's so important is mammals co-regulate. They
Mm.
don't self-regulate. Self-regulation is very popular today, but I think as much as it might help us feel slightly better, it's a form of tranquilizing.
Mm.
Most animals in the zoo are all tranquilized. They're on antidepressants, um, because you can't live in that kind of world and have a life.
Wow.
That's not what your soul is meant to be, is to be locked in a cage. So the containment, and as you said, wild means something. We've been taught wild is bad. Wild is you're going to just do something that we're all going to be so shocked by. That's actually not what the wild world is like. It's actually very coherent. So when mammals co-regulate, the baby is co-regulating with a more developed nervous system, its mother.
Uh-huh.
So if we don't hold our babies, if babies don't get to regulate on a being that's more mature than them, they don't have any strategies for that. And crying out is not a strategy. Crying out is an opening of opiates in their system. That's how they fall asleep. They're actually preparing themselves for being eaten. In the primal world, mammals co-regulate. That means we are a species that connects with other beings, but it's the world itself. So when you're rolling around on the ground or you wrap your arms around a tree or, you know, you are regulating to a tree's
Mm.
energetic field, which trees are very good to regulate with because they go deep in the ground and go tall. So they really allow our axis to meet another axis that's very rooted,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
You know, but most children, no matter what their life experience is, who have found horses, rode bareback or rolled around on the soil, or played in trees or, ran along the river or had dogs or, whatever, had life of something that was really alive. And that's what they were regulating with. That's what made them survive whatever traumatic life experience that was going on around them. And why we think, you know, children who do that, how poor they are, how unenriched they are by what civilization could bring to them. I'm not so sure that's the way it really is about. That's what we've been told,
Mm.
that the mechanistic world is the way to go, is the education, is the intellect of the brain, is the development of culture, is well, I wouldn't call it culture, but and I'm not saying those things aren't part of who we are, because they are at this point, but there needs to be a balance in one's life.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing is with electronics being the dominant pulse, we're losing the vibrational field of the earth. And we literally are losing the vibrational field of the earth. And one of the ways to access her, I would call her Mother Earth, is to literally touch the earth, to be in contact physically with the earth, some part of hopefully every day.
Mm.
And it might be, a tree in Brooklyn. It might be a river that you sit and let move through you, you know.
Mm. Wow, that's amazing. It's, I think this conversation, I know we have to end this soon, within a minute, but there's,
Well, was about we have a few. We have a few. You can go over your Zoom time. We
okay,
have if we're on track, it'd be I don't know what time it would be in your world. 8:30.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay, so,
So how would you like to go before we end?
okay. I want to talk a little bit about hydration.
Hmm.
Um, Even just like, me looking at you right now, I just feel like you're so hydrated. Like it's from within. I can see it and I can feel it. And I hope you don't mind me asking what your age is.
I'm 76.
Yeah, there is no way that I could be like, oh yeah, she's 76. It's just the way you are. And
I wasn't always, I was a very dry 21-year-old or 20-year-old, very stiff.
hmm, and I remember even listening to one of your audios on YouTube, and I think you were talking about Baba Yaga.
Hmm.
That, and I loved it because, you know, I'm really fascinated by the voice. And even in yoga, voice can be a really powerful tool because, you can trigger people with your voice so you can really help them land.
Hmm.
And I think one thing I really noticed about that video was your voice because it was just an audio. So, um,
Hmm.
and it just felt so deep. Like, it was just deep, like from your core, like from your inner core. And is this part of, I'm assuming, is this part of the work that you have done, playing with the psoas for so many years?
Yeah, yeah. I would say the person who really I attribute that to is Emilie Conrad. She's worth pursuing. She's passed on, but her website has a lot of her old videos and conversations, and she has a rich voice. She brought voice as vibration, frequency that stirred the waters, the internal waters.
Mm.
It allowed something to come in and like aquatically, like we know that, aquatic animals are hearing vibrational fields through the sounds of things and they can disrupt them, they can harmonize. There's something about that vibration moving through water that can soften an open tissue that has dried in and psoas can dry. Literally, the psoas dries up in people, and it's it's not a metaphor. It's a reality,
Mm.
and then it shrinks. So one of the things I want to say in yoga is you never stretch the psoas because a lunge does not stretch the psoas, even though that's a psoas stretch, they say,
Yeah.
because you can't stretch dry tissue. You have to have a plump psoas to do a lunge that doesn't pull you apart, but keeps you in your core. You have to be able to come from a orbital tissue that's very fluid, which is supporting the kidneys because all the organs are on top of the psoas. So the more you can play, I think sound, I like balls. A lot of the yoga teachers who ended up working with me over the years ended up slowing down, doing less. They'd say, I don't know if I do yoga anymore. Uh, but they were teaching yoga, but they would allow, they would spend time getting in the bone. They would time, playing with sound. And I like sound. One of the things that Emily spoke to was breath is ancient and we don't know what it is to breathe. So when we're doing a lot of breath work, it's a form of over trying to get something to happen. Whereas when you play with sound, it allows the breath to know what it actually is. And what I found in that was that I don't breathe, I am breathed. And that's a deep relaxation in the core of your being to not feel that,
Yeah.
and most of us come in with that chakra. And then we go around the rest of our life like that. But doing an exercise doesn't really, it's like manipulation on top of manipulation. You're already manipulated. Um, the cord was cut too fast. There wasn't time for relationship to bond, for breast and mouth to find each other, to be in this deep connection that literally let go of the placenta. And it doesn't have to be, 10 days, but you see how the blood changes and the breath changes and the baby is co-regulated to the mother and comfortable there and finding its way there. And then breath isn't something that's up high, it's deep. It's the cells are always breathing. You're being breathed by life. So I think it's a rich territory to play with, to work with sound and play with sound, not as a mantra necessarily, because I think that's a kind of like water on rock. It does do something, right? But that's different than playing with a sound and then pausing
Mhm.
and letting that sound move through you. and you're making the sound or someone else is making the sound, but it's moving through you and you are like being touched by it.
Yeah. I did I think you talk about the sh sound,
Mm-hmm.
or just like a long exhale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I I really, really enjoy the long exhale. I even taught this to my mother, who had a procedure actually, and she's been having trouble walking on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And I know she's, like the way she's always been very stressed out person, didn't really know how to relax properly and let go. And so I started playing with this exhale with her. And so when she's struggling to lift her left leg, so I just ask her to exhale. And I go, just take a long exhale. And I think there is this shyness with the sound as well.
Making sound. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think maybe culturally as well, you don't want to come across as too wild again,
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a lot about domestication. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Our inhibitions are based on domestication.
Yeah, so I just go,
Mm-hmm.
and then she just goes it and she does it or she tries to do it. I'm like, just let it out, like let it out. And
Mm-hmm.
when she lets go and does that exhale, I also notice and she notices that she's able to take that step forward.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, but such a simple thing and so profound.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. For somebody who's not like using it as a tool, the long exhale is a way to come to the bottom of breath where you're in actually a still point, where you're not inhaling or exhaling. There's no gasping.
Yeah.
And that is a profound place to be. I think it must be, I imagine it's like the moment the tide changes in the ocean. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know what that moment is. How does the tide know how far it goes to before it returns?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that is, but that's the still point. That's the moment where your organism is no longer breathing. It's you are breathed. And that's the beginning of that trust that I don't have to do everything. Like I am actually can be responsive rather than reactive.
And that's that trust in something bigger.
Yeah, because I don't think you can tell somebody to relax, or to let go.
Yeah.
Because to let go, to what, to where, to how? I would say, I like the word to put it down, so to speak. You can put it down here and pick it up later if you want. Um, but the whole idea, of often I grew up in the 60s and 70s, the idea of letting go, to be free, to all this stuff, that doesn't really work for me. I had to land and locate to feel that sense of connection. That's the co-regulation. Because the letting go, that's like free flying. You might land or you might not. I don't know what's going to happen. But when you can actually a root, then you're more like a willow tree where there can be a lot of freedom and fullness, but you are a mammal. You are rooted on this earth. You're not a bird, like you're actually embodying the kind of species that you are, or the kind of creature you are. You inhabit the creature that you are. And we are mammals and we are animals. And our paws tell us something about the earth that our sensory system can't. The bones tell us there's information there that tells us about things we cannot see, we
Yeah.
cannot hear, we cannot touch, we cannot smell. That's the intuitive knowing. And I say it's like, the pause, that relationship of earth to bone lets us know that the elephants are dancing on the other side of the mountain. There's information there that I don't know how I got it, you know? It's like, but I know it.
That's
And
intuition.
yeah.
Mm.
So
And when we're not in our bones or when we're not landed, then we are quite, well, it's, we're not
we
even,
have to orient some, we have to have strategies, and that's how people use the psoas. It's a strategy of something to hang on to, so to speak, something to lock into, to just feel like, here I am, here I am. But it's a connection to the breath and the manipulation of the breath. So to me, when we do breathing exercises or breathing techniques, we are overlaying it on a system that already is working with dysfunctional or manipulation. So I don't want to manipulate myself to manipulate, something that happened to me. I trust that my organism is very intelligent and that I'm in the way. So I don't try to do something right. I I am curious what is interrupting an animal body that knows exactly where it is in space and time, that knows exactly what it's 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 showing up in this time and space, not some random one, but like in this moment.
in the present moment.
That's a trust that my I don't have to manipulate. I can so I'm always looking when I'm teaching, I'm not looking for people to do something right. See, I'm not performative.
Yeah.
I'm looking for what's interrupting being able to extend your leg or lift your arm or not something in your core hurt or be
So
pulled out of alignment.
if you were to give me one example, what is interrupting? Like, for example, if someone comes to,
Engaging the upper psoas, the engagement of the upper psoas. So if I'm teaching an advanced course right now to small group of people. It's a mentorship. And what I'm going to be showing them is a lot of yoga poses because most of them are a manipulation. You're not in the pose. You're trying to put yourself in the pose, or you're hypermobile and you're in the pose, but you're not in your bones because your ligaments are too loose. So when we're in our bones, there's a grounded rootedness, but there's also humility there because all of a sudden you don't have the range of motion you thought you did.
yeah,
So so that takes a more nuance than just getting in there and twisting in and locking down and locking joints and torquing pelvises and all that. And what happens to the psoas then is it gets misused and really, frankly, abused. You know, it's and then ultimately it doesn't serve us. It might look good for a while, but you know, all the yogis that come and work with me after they've been through this series in the Western world. And I'm not talking about the traditions of yoga. I'm talking about how the Western world works with yoga. And
absolutely.
there are articles on my website, Core Awareness, that I wrote, in 1999 at the Yoga Journal and wrote for International Yoga. There's a lot of yoga stuff there, not because I'm a yogi, but because that was one of the places that the world found out I existed was through the yoga community.
Mm.
Um, uh, just because I wrote it was a magazine, and I wrote and made a comment about something somebody said about the psoas that wasn't accurate, and 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 so they did allow me to write some articles, and so I was in that world for a while, traveling to places and working with people. And I wasn't in the tradition, so I wasn't embodying the tradition.
Yeah.
I was simply, and now it's really a form of exercise, right? It's not the tradition.
Nope.
Those choices have been lost and the traditions. But there's one thing about it is that it was a tradition, my understanding, of mostly young boys
Yeah.
as a way of cultivating. And so there's an insistence on the pelvis being overextended,
Hmm.
pulling the ribs down, lengthening the spine, tucking the tail. Those are all submissive behaviors. They are not expressive, and they are definitely not female. The female body has a pelvis, both male and female pelvises rock. But when we're in neutral, so to speak, the female pelvis has to have a flexion to it because our womb, the uterus, has to float in the star-shaped ligaments. And because mammals are mostly, primates have done both, but most males in the um, in the mammal world enter the female from behind, the pelvis, the tail is up, the presentation is up. When we lock that all down and try to create a column instead of a living river, we disrupt, especially women, a lot of reproductive issues and overstabilization, and that's where we interfere. So that's a big interference, is performing, trying to get there, whether I'm ready or not, because I want that feeling like I've accomplished something or I feel the pressure of accomplishing. That's a place where we interfere. We interfere in a lot of different systems of fitness that we believe will make us strong, and so we're insisting that we lock our core down as a stabilization, but it's actually the very place we express ourselves fully as a living organism. So when we play with
Fascinating.
that, yeah, that's a good place to end.
Yes, I think so. It's I think there's just so much unfurling, like, you can just keep going on and on and on.
And that's why I've been able to spend an entire life playing with the psoas,
Yeah.
because you pull on one thing in the universe and it's attached to everything else.
Amazing. I'm so inspired, and I do have a lot of respect for what you do and what you've done. And I have so much to learn from you. But I really do appreciate, like truly appreciate you giving me your time today.
It was great to be with you,
Thank,
Viola. Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Liz. And I'll make a note and I'll mention your website and everything. So if any,
Yeah, share your link with me. I'll share it with other people.
okay, great.
I went to Australia a lot. I taught a lot in Australia over the years. There's lots of people who would probably love to connect with you.
Ah, really?
Oh,
Okay,
oh yeah, I've
fantastic.
done all kinds of workshops for you. It's quite
Maybe
a
I
few
can come
years,
again.
4 years. Yeah. No, no.
No.
Mm.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Liz. Bye.